Hello, and welcome to this evening's Tegater Talk. My name is Becca Kraske, and I'm a member of the St. Francis Cabrini community, and I'm also the incoming chair of the Parish Council. Thank you. I'll speak up. Thank you all for coming tonight. It's really wonderful to see everyone here. These Tegater Talks rely on your donations to support this and future events, so we'll be passing a basket around later after Sister Jeannine's presentation, and please consider contributing. We'll take cash or check. And you can also donate on the Cabrini website, although our card reader is not working tonight, so you'll have to go online yourself. After the main presentation, we will have a period for questions, and I will be coming around with a microphone. And you have a note card, which you can use to write down questions as they come up for you. But the note cards are just for you to keep for your own notes. Many of you will recall that these talks are held to honor the wishes of our former pastor, Father Mike Tegater. Shortly before his death in 2016, he stated, "If I have any legacy at Cabrini, I hope it is that I tried to encourage adult conversation about vital things." The Tegater Talks Working Group invites speakers to address vital topics of faith and social justice, and most importantly, to encourage adult conversation. A couple of logistics: please silence your cell phones, and restrooms are located up the stairs in the office, and there are also extra bathrooms in the basement. And just a heads up, we'll just have a couple minutes between the presentation and the question and answer period, so not a real break, and we'll wrap up around 9 o'clock. As we begin our evening together, let us acknowledge that St. Francis Cabrini sits on the ancestral homelands of many indigenous tribes, including most recently the Dakota and Anishinaabe. We gratefully and humbly acknowledge the Native people on whose ancestral homelands we gather, as well as the diverse and vibrant Native communities who make their home in the Twin Cities area today. Our task is to support the recovery of Native cultures, land, and languages, and to advocate for justice for all people. Our speaker this evening is Sister Jeannine Gramick, who is part of the Loretto community. She grew up in Philadelphia, joined the School Sisters of Notre Dame in 1960, and earned her master's and Ph.D. in mathematics before becoming active in LGBTQ ministry in the early 1970s. Along with Father Robert Nugent, she co-founded New Ways Ministry, a Catholic LGBTQ ministry, and helped to start 3 chapters of Dignity. For more than 20 years, her religious community, the School Sisters of Notre Dame, assigned her to LGBTQ ministry. Because of opposition to her work, in 1999, the Vatican's Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith declared she should no longer be engaged in this pastoral work. In 2001, she transferred to the Sisters of Loretto, which supports her LGBTQ ministry. She has become a pen pal with Pope Francis, and last year had a meeting with him at the Vatican. Sister Gramick is the subject of a documentary film, has written numerous articles and books, and has been recognized by numerous groups for her work. Check out tonight's program for more details on her biography. Let's welcome Sister Jeannine Gramick.
Thank you very much. I am delighted to be here with you tonight. And as you can see, the topic for tonight is Catholic LGBTQ plus ministry. What gives us hope? So I want to share with you tonight some of the things that give me hope. When I say things, there are many things that give me hope. And we'll have time also to discuss what gives you hope. But I'd like to say, whoop, I thought that was going to be a... Is this okay? Can you see me all right? Because I'd like to roam. What gives me most hope are people. God gives me hope, but God speaks to me most through people. Of course, through the environment and through squirrels and my cat, but most of all, God speaks to me and gives me hope through people. So when I entered religious life at the young age, well, let me say of, should I say 2? No. And I should say the leaflets that you got for tonight, that's an old picture of me, just so you know. But when I entered religious life, I had absolutely no idea of where my life would go. It was a life that would be dedicated to God through people. But as I was a graduate student at the University of Pennsylvania, I met a gay man, and that changed the direction of my life. That gay man gave me hope. Even though he was telling me things that were just terrible in 1971 that unfortunately still happen today in portions of our church and outside of our church. But the fact that he persisted in his faith and the faith of his friends who said they were thrown out of the confessional, told never to come back to church again, but they still loved the church. And we began having liturgies in his apartment for his gay friends. Now, this was right after Vatican II, and some of you, I think, not all, but some of you here probably remember the days right after Vatican II, when we had Eucharist in people's homes, because we wanted to foster community. We wanted to foster loving people and getting to know people. So we had the Eucharist at his apartment for his gay friends. And after a year, this was in the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia, and after a year or so, that initial group grew into a chapter of Dignity Philadelphia. So I'm very proud they call me the grandmother, you know, the grandmother of Dignity Philadelphia. I came back from the university to teach at the College of Notre Dame of Maryland, which my community operated at the time. I was a school sister of Notre Dame. And there are school sisters of Notre Dame here in this area, and some here tonight. So I want to acknowledge them and thank them for being here. The school sisters of Notre Dame, my provincials and other leaders following the provincial at the time, were women of vision. And of course they said, don't let your studies slip, but do whatever you can for this group of individuals, they said, that the church has neglected. Now this is 1971. So for women in the church to realize that the church needed to reach out in 1971 to, in those days we called it the lesbian gay community, I think was very forward-looking. So we had women of vision in the School Sisters of Notre Dame in my community. As we know from history, church history, not everyone, even after Vatican II, thought it was a good idea for the church to reach out to this group of individuals. So there were some complaints made, but the complaints really went to my religious superiors. And to their credit, they defended me and the ministry and the LGBTQ community. In fact, one of my provincials said, anytime you speak with a group of lesbian and gay Catholics, please give them my love and tell them that I am praying for them and with them. And so, just as my religious community leader told me to share that good news with the lesbian gay community, I would like to say that before I came here, I wrote a little note to Pope Francis to tell him I was coming to St. Francis Cabrini Parish, and he said, give them my love and my blessings, and always have hope. I told him the topic that we were going to discuss this evening was hope. So he said, always have hope. And when I met with him last year, which was wonderful, there were three things that he impressed, at least that impressed me from what he said. He left me with the message of hope, left me with a message of praying, always pray, and the third message was humor. You must have a sense of humor. So I just want to share that with you. And we can talk more about Pope Francis, because I know there's some little controversy because of his 60-minute interview, but at any rate. So the support that I had from the School Sisters of Notre Dame continued from 1971, decades. And not only support from the school sisters, but other communities of women religious. When we were not welcomed in some dioceses, it was always the mother houses or the retreat houses of the sisters that would welcome us to come and give presentations and have our programs. But you asked me, or I shared with you, that my hope comes from individuals, and so I had great hope from my school leaders in the SSNDs, but also we had the Vatican pursuing us, and the Vatican 3 times asked my community leaders to investigate me and suggest sanctions. Well, 3 times there was the investigation, but the report that went back to the Vatican was, she's doing the work of the church. And in fact, we should have more people doing this kind of ministry. So that gave me great hope. But you might say, well, what about like Cardinal Ratzinger and those individuals at the Vatican who gave such hardship to people? Well, I'd like to think that in some way that they give me hope too, because I feel that we are in a big church. It's a big tent. We don't all think alike, but we have to learn to live together, right? And not just in our church, but think of the political climate in our country today. But we have the left, we have the right, we have the middle, we have shades in between. But I like to think of us as a church. When I pray about us as a church, I think of the passage in the Gospel of John where Jesus is at the Last Supper with his disciples. And remember, he says, I am the vine and you are the branches, right? I am the vine and you are the branches. And I think, here am I, let's see, get this correct. Here am I on the left branch, way out here on the left branch. And then here was Cardinal Ratzinger over here on the right branch. But we were together, we were rooted in Christ. We had the same faith in Jesus and in God, our Creator. So we are together in the faith, even though we have many different political views, different ecclesiastical views, different social views, but we are rooted in Christ. So in 1999, the Vatican did come out with a statement because the School Sisters of Notre Dame didn't give them the right answer that they wanted. So the Vatican issued a directive, a notification, that I and Father Nugent, who was the priest that I worked with, should not continue in this ministry. And I took a year of discernment, and after the year of discernment and much prayer, coming from people, because that's where I get my message from God, said to me that there was still a need, and I should answer that need. So I continued in the ministry. And if I continued in the ministry, the School Sisters of Notre Dame would have had to dismiss me. And so I transferred to another community. So I'm now a sister of Loretto. And there's the, work for justice and act for peace is kind of a motto of Loretto. So I kind of went to a good community because they got letters from the Vatican. 9 letters in all. But the letters stopped in 2009, actually before Pope Francis became Pope. And those of us with the collective church, mind, history in our heads about what happened, well, at least if you're a nun, what happened in 2009, the Vatican announced they were going to have an investigation of all the religious communities in the United States. So why bother about this one nun who's working in LGBT ministry? They are going to investigate all religious communities. And as we know, what the investigations went on, the visitations to all the different religious congregations. But then in 2013, we have Pope Francis, and so suddenly all of these cases are just, you've done a good job. We've investigated you, you've done a good job. So that was the end of the troubles with the Vatican. So all of that, was hopeful for me. But I really want to share with you 3 people in particular. In looking at my life, 3 people in particular that have given me hope. And one of them is the foundress of the School Sisters of Notre Dame, my first community, because it was not easy to go through that Vatican investigation. It was announced in 1985, concluded in 1999, so there were many years there of, what should I say, of anxiety. But I remember many times during those years of repeating a message from the foundress of the School Sisters of Notre Dame, because she was born in Germany. The congregation started in Germany, but in about 1837 or so, she sent sisters to the United States. She never came to the United States, but the sisters faced hardships, all right? Poverty was just one, but many hardships. Confrontations with bishops, which is, I guess, normal throughout history. But she wrote to the sisters, and in one of her letters, she said, "All of the works of God proceed slowly and in pain, but their roots are the sturdier, and their flowering the lovelier." And so that I repeated over and over again so many times, and it just buoyed me up. It gave me great hope. So again, what I'm saying is I found hope through a person and other people. The second person I want to share with you that gave me great hope, she was not the foundress of the Sisters of Loretto, but she was a sister of Loretto. When was it? The Vatican Council was called in before 1962. It began in 1962. And when the council was announced, the president of the Leadership Conference of Women Religious, which is what we call like the Mother Superiors in the United States, the president of that whole group of leaders of women religious was Sister Mary Luke Tobin, who was a sister of Loretto. And so when she heard that the council was going to be called, she said to her secretary, "We're going over there." She didn't wait for the invitation. She says, "We are going." So while she and her companion were they didn't fly over, they went by boat. she got a cablegram on the boat saying, inviting her to come as a representative of the sisters in the United States. So she was a great woman. I mean, she didn't let any grass grow under her feet, you know. She saw something that needed to be done, and she went right to it. So Mary Luke Tobin, when I transferred to the Sisters of Loretto, which was in 2001, she was, of course, no longer president. She was retired. But we have many wonderful stories about Mary Luke, and I want to tell you just one, because that might give you hope, too. This was when she was younger, and she was demonstrating, like there was the grape boycott, there was for the farm workers, and so many boycotts, and she was there praying and boycotting at one of, I don't even remember which one, but an officer came up to her, and she was identified as a woman religious, and he said, "Sister, you know, what would your Mother Superior think that you're right here?" And she looked up to him and she said, "Officer, I am the Mother Superior." So that was Mary Luke. So, but I guess the saying of Mary Luke that gave me great hope and continues to give me great hope, she said, "Go out on the limb. That's where the fruit is." Like, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Go out there, take the risk, because that's where the fruit is. And so the Sisters of Loretto are pioneer women. We were an American foundation. My first community was founded in Germany, but the Sisters of Loretto started here in the United States in 1820, when we were just a new country, a new nation. We were founded in Kentucky, when Kentucky was the farthest part of the US at that time. And then as the country went west, so did the Lorettos. We were pioneer women. And I think Mary Luke symbolizes that spirit of being a pioneer. Going out on the limb, that's where the fruit is. And that gives me hope. And then the third person I'd like to share with you, who has given me a lot of hope, is my beloved father, who is now with God. But in 1971, I mentioned that I was at the University of Pennsylvania, and I met the gay man and his friends. And I chose to go to the University of Pennsylvania. I could have gone, elsewhere for my degree, but I'm from Philadelphia. I grew up and I was born and raised in Philadelphia. My parents lived there, and I thought, well, if I'm in Philadelphia, I'll see my parents more often. And of course, I'm an only, well, I shouldn't say of course, but I'm an only child, so I was spoiled, In 1971, I was living with another group of sisters near the university, and Dominic, who's the young man I mentioned that got me involved, was also very, what shall I say, media savvy. And he knew how to get things done, and he knew that the media will help you get things done. So unbeknownst to me, he told the Philadelphia, well, now there's only one paper, it was the two papers, the Evening Bulletin, that this nun was meeting with gay people, at the convent. And so they wanted to do a story. So he had arranged it. I said, oh, okay, we can do the story. So the story came out the day that my parents were coming to visit me. Now, I hadn't mentioned to my parents that I was involved with the lesbian and gay community at the university. So my parents come to the convent, and my father says, well, what's this? There was a big story in the style section with a big picture, nun meets with gays in convent. And I said, well, that's what I'm doing. You know, I'm meeting with gay people here. And he said, well, why are you doing that? I said, well, Daddy, somebody has to, because this group has been excluded from the church, and they're part of the church, and they need to be welcomed back to the church. Well, let the other nuns do it. And he says, you just teach. You know, he wanted me, because he knew I was being prepared to teach at the College of Notre Dame of Maryland. You teach like the other nuns. And then he said, and he had been in the World War II. He was a vet and very patriotic. And he said, and this is the height of the Vietnam War, well, you're not going to burn any draft records, are you? Because friends of mine were doing that. And I said, well, probably not. But suppose I did. And he thought a minute. He said, well, that's against our country. But if you did it, it would be all right, because you're my daughter. And I have thought of that so often since that time and since his passing, that to me, it showed the unconditional love that he had for his daughter, and my mother too, but she wasn't as articulate as my father or as forceful. But it's like, I might not agree with you, but if you did it, it's okay, because I love you. You're my daughter. And what it says to me is that it's an example of God's love for us. It's like no matter what we do, it could be wrong in God's eyes, or God might think, why are you doing that stupid thing? But if you did it, it's all right, because you're my daughter, you're my son, I love you, it's okay. And so it was my dad, it still is my dad, and the foundress of my first community and a great leader of my second community, as examples of people in my life who give me great hope. Great hope. And there are others, but they were the three that I would like. Oh, wait a minute, we didn't put, sorry. There's my dad. And me when I was much younger. But if you did it, it would be all right, because you're my daughter. So that's what I would like to share with you, and I hope now we can have a good discussion about what gives you hope, and also what gives you hope in terms of the LGBTQ plus ministry, because I've been involved with this so long, but I want to hear what you are doing and what you would like to see. All right? And here's the mic for whoever wants it. No. I can say that I'm a product of Vatican II also, and was on fire after Vatican II. And in fact, I thought in 1974, we saw the ordination of the Episcopal women, and I was privileged to be at that ordination. And I thought, and next year, when we're having the big women's ordination conference in Detroit, we'll probably have an ordination after that. You know, well, it didn't happen. But what I realized is that, there's politics in the church, which we know. And as we know, when John the 23rd died and Paul the 6th came in, we said, oh, we don't have John the 23rd anymore. But as someone said later, Paul the 6th looks better and better. So the next two pontificates, with the John Paul II and Benedict, lasted for what, 30 years or so at least, and that changed things around politically, at least here in the United States. And the bishops who were appointed prior, during the time of Paul VI, the bishops that were appointed had pastoral experience. The Vatican asked the delegate, the nuncio in Washington, to submit names of those priests who they thought would be good bishops, but had pastoral experience. And many of them, many of them, had degrees in social work. Once John Paul came in, the criteria was no longer pastoral experience, but you needed a degree in canon law. So we went from leaders who had their heart and body with the people to leaders who followed law. So that's a big factor. But what I see now is Pope Francis is trying to change that around, all right? And you don't change, if you're a battleship out in the waters, you don't change that battleship around 180 degrees all at once or it'll capsize, right? So it's going to take a long time. In fact, I won't be here. I never thought I would see same-sex marriage. I mean, politically. In fact, I was asked that question, in the Vatican investigation. Never even thought of it. Didn't thought that would be a reality. But now, even though in the interview, Pope Francis said we bless same-sex couples, and he said, well, we bless them as individuals. Well, of course he needs to say that there's politics involved. There's politics involved. And he's getting a lot of pushback from the conservatives, particularly in the United States, who have lots of money. But I guess the way I look at it, because I'm a student of history. I love history, and I love church history. And oh my God, if you know church history and read about the scandals that existed throughout the course of history, but how they've been rectified, and how we've had teachings, not just on sexual ethics, that have changed, because we don't teach anymore what Augustine taught, that if a husband and wife had sexual intercourse, but if they didn't produce a child, they were sinning. It was only venial because they were married. But we don't, that changed. But the sexual teaching will change further. But I never thought I would, and I may not see that before I die. But there are lots of changes recently, in the last 10 years or so, that I never thought I would see. So what am I trying to say? I guess I'm trying to say, let's not think we're going to have perfection before we die. I think the church will, we're going to the parousia. We're on the journey. And things are changing, but things change slowly. And you can't have a tsunami. You can't have a change just like that. Because if you know the bell curve from your psychology, all right, that's how, looking at that bell curve, you have law changing when the bulk of the people under that bell curve say, yeah, that makes sense. But you always have that 2% here that are the forerunners. They're saying, look, let's get there. What's wrong with you? But they're the pushers and the movers and the shakers. But then you're going to have the 2% at the other end of the tail that even when the law changes, no, it's not right. We're not going to do that. So I guess what I'm saying is I don't look for perfection from the church or any institution in my lifetime. I work for it, but I don't expect it. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful. And it says to me, it resonates with me, let me say that. It resonates with me because church for me is local. I work to change the structure, but the church is local. It's the people that I interact with that have the faith that I have. And then I say to many LGBT people who were born Catholic, but they say, well, I can't, be with this institution anymore because they're looking at the top. And I say, well, then you need just find your spiritual home. That's what church is. It's our spiritual home. My spiritual home is the Catholic Church. It's my spiritual family. But we all need a spiritual home. So thank you for pointing out that really, I think church is local. Yeah. But we have to work to change that top. Yeah. Yes, the church is local, and I want to commend St. Joan of Arc, and that gives me an opportunity to say to you that there are a growing number of parishes in the U.S. that are LGBTQ friendly. We at New Ways Ministry started tracking this like in the 90s, and now if you go to our website, newwaysministry.org, and click on parishes, you will see, because if you travel, you want to go to Mass someplace that's going to welcome you, and they're listed by state, then find your city. Now, it's only a drop in the bucket because we have thousands of parishes, but I think there are about 300 parishes at least now on that list, and they keep growing. So church is local. Well, I think Pope Francis is pointing us in that direction when he talks about synodality. Synodality isn't coming together and just talking with people. That's part of it. We have to listen to people. And it's not just going to a meeting and on synodality and trying to convince people of what I believe. I hopefully say humbly what I believe, but I have to listen too. And I know many of us were disappointed at the end of October in 2023 with the first session on synodality because, well, at least in the U.S., LGBT wasn't mentioned, although it was mentioned in the Italian document. But the point is, there was a lot of discussion about LGBTQ issues and a lot of testimony that the people there heard, people who it was probably very shocking for them to hear that. But that's what it's going to take. We're not going to have a perfect church even at the end of this synod session in October of 24. It's going to take years and years of talking with each other and listening, really listening. And as you say, not trying to push my agenda, but say what I believe, but to listen humbly. And that's a real discipline. That's a real discipline. I know, because because I think I'm right all the time, you know. But I think the answer is synodality. And some parishes, you know, whether the bishop advocates it or not, some parishes are doing that, like having conversations. We could just call it conversations. But to me, that's part of what's going to get us to be a true church, if we sit down, talk with each other, listen with each other. Synodality. Before I get, well, it's part of the parish level, I think there's a lot to be said about invitation. So if we know people who were once Catholic but now feel alienated, I think it behooves us to invite them, say, like as Jesus did, come and see. Come and see. It's different. It may not be perfect, but why don't you come and see? And then on the parish level, to talk with leaders in the parish council, pastor, whoever, some of the people, can we have a conversation, intergenerational? Maybe like an evening would be set aside for that. But it's going to be up to us to invite people to come. So two things, the responsibility on us to invite, and the responsibility on the parish to set up a conversation. For the last almost 20 years at least, New Ways Ministry has had conferences for women religious, both women religious who are leaders in their congregations, formation directors and vocation directors, and sisters who are lesbian or gay. And now we found out just the last couple years who are non-binary and transgender. And I would recommend, because we published a book a couple years ago called Love Tenderly, Sacred Stories of Lesbian, Queer, Women Religious. And you can find it, either through Amazon, but I would rather you go to the New Ways Ministry website. We also know that we have gay priests. I mean, that's been a perennial question. I mean, it's more like the nuns have been shunted because people talk about the male, the gay priest. And in about 2000, the New York Times did a big story on gay priests when the Vatican was going through their the Congregation for the Clergy and barring those men who felt they were gay. But at any rate, I won't go into all that. So there were a number of priests who had come out in the New York Times at that time. In fact, even before that, when I first got involved, in the early 70s, and I was marching in the Christopher Street Parade, which was the precursor of the Pride parades, Christopher Street, after Greenwich Village, the explosion there. We had priests, gay priests marching in that parade who were known publicly to be gay. John McNeil, for one, who's now deceased. Brian, it doesn't matter what their names were, but they were gay priests. So in 2000, let me go back a little bit. Dignity had a convention in 1977 in Chicago, and one of the workshops given there was led by two gay priests. And as a result of that workshop, an organization formed for gay clergy and religious, which was called Communication Ministry. And it existed, it was fine. They had retreats for gay priests and religious. In fact, it was mostly dominated by men, so some of the women came to us, have something for the nuns. But at any rate, it existed with giving retreats, and there was a newsletter, and the membership probably grew at its height to over 500. But then you had the sexual abuse crisis. And what happened with the sexual abuse, the terrible things that happened, well, one of the terrible things is it was blamed on gay priests. And so gay priests who were formerly out went into the closet. Yeah. So now I think that the tensions are easing. And in fact, there's a book coming out next year by a gay priest, his memoir. And he's one of the priests who led the Dignity Convention workshop in 1977, Father Paul Morrissey. And it's a beautiful testimony of what a gay priest goes through. And it's similar, really, to the stories that any LGBT person goes through. The story of knowing who you are and being told by an authority that, no, that's not who you are. So there's that tension. But I guess my point is that lesbian nuns and gay priests are now coming out, but we don't, well, depends on what circles we travel, and we don't hear it that much. But well, no, we're not in Milwaukee. In Milwaukee, there was a priest who, after the New York Times ad, did a lot of media interviews. But at any rate, it's happening. And you're right, it needs to happen. But there is the fear, and I think there's more fear among the priests of their bishop. And it's the fear because they love their ministry. And they fear that if the bishop finds out that, well, obviously a lot of the bishops know, but if it's found out publicly that they're gay, the bishop will take them out of the ministry. And they love what they're doing. They love working with the people. The nuns have an easier time of it because by and large, of course, nothing's general, but by and large, women religious leaders are very supportive of their lesbian sisters. And we've done a lot of education on sexuality in women's communities. But thank you, that's a very, very good question. Thank you for sharing that, because as you experienced in the parish, even what you say, you're in a kind of traditional parish, when we look at the opinion polls broken down by religion, Catholics are more accepting of LGBT people than other, well, except the Jews. But I think it's up to 80% of Catholics support civil rights legislation, and about 60% of Catholics support same-sex marriage. So, even if we can't judge a parish or a diocese by the bishop, because I think the people really know better, by and large, and you've experienced that. Well, I would just say we do what we can, everyone's tolerance is different. I think we're like pieces of cloth. And some of us are silk, and some of us are cotton, and some of us are burlap. And when you put the iron on silk, what happens? But then you put it on burlap, So we can't say, oh, I can do this so somebody else can. We do whatever we can. That's what we're called to do. Yeah, thanks. And I think, as you indicated, telling our story, I would urge you, if you feel you can, to write to your bishop and ask to meet with him, either you and some others, and And just, not in a confrontational way at all, but just to tell your story, just so he knows people's experiences. That's the important thing, to share our stories. I think that's how people's hearts are changed. Well, I sustain myself, hopefully, through God, which is people. And one of those people is my dad. And I have my dad's constitution. I mean, he died when he was 90. He was never sick. Well, he had one operation. He had a gallbladder operation. Well, I had an operation too. You know what it was? A gallbladder operation, yeah. So I never get sick, don't take any medications, Of course, I'm 81, but he lived to 90, and I think I'm going to outlive him. But in the question of retirement, yes, I'm trying to retire, but I'm trying to find people that can carry on, let's say. And we're making provisions for that, yeah. But in my retirement, I'm still going to work. Anybody else want to talk about retirement? Well, I hope you continue this conversation here or wherever, whatever parish you're in, whatever faith community you're a part of. We have to continue the conversation because, well, I believe that will give us hope. Hope for ourselves, hope for others, to share our stories with others. So I just want to thank you for coming tonight, and hopefully I'll see you again.
Thank you again to everyone for coming, and we appreciate your contributions if you're able to support more talks like this in the future. Thanks again. Thank you so much.